Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome if you're new. Today I'm going to be doing my October reading wrap up. I hope everybody had an awesome spooky month, a great Halloween as much as you were able to. I had a really good time actually, so I'm excited and happy that that happened. Fortunately, to start this on a bummer note, but in the UK we are now on another lockdown, this time for a month. I don't know why they just didn't do a longer lockdown to begin with. I understand the situation of shops and everything, the economy basically going to shit, but I feel like just doing that again now is going to do the same thing, so I don't know why they just didn't do it for long and more intense last time. My own opinion, sorry about that. Let's move on to some happier things. Before I get into the actual wrap up, I just want to voice a query. So I've been trying this month, or last month rather, to be doing a nice reading journal and trying to make it how I want it to look in terms of aesthetics and content. So I didn't know if I should do like a separate video flicking through it and then like within that video at the end drawing my spread for the next month, or if I should just like, I might not always do that, I might just catch up and do a flick through every couple of months or whatever, or include it in this, like when I'm talking about the stats, to flick through the stats page or whatever. I feel like I might get confused doing that because I'd still want to show you like everything. So I think I might just, I don't know what I want to do really. I think I might just do what I said originally and kind of flick through and do a separate video with that. If you're interested, I don't know whether to include the flick through at the end of this video, I don't know. So I'm still undecided, so maybe if you guys have any opinions you can let me know. So yeah, I guess just keeping the general layout, I'm just going to go through the current reads that I had coming into the month. So I had Folklore, Myths and Legends but of Britain that I was still reading, and War Girls by Tochi Onibuchi. In terms of notes and updates, I had already surpassed my NetGalley reading books that I wanted to challenge myself to try and get on top of. My goal was for 20 books this year and I managed to read 30 books in total so far. I only read one NetGalley book this during October. I also took part in a buddy read with Deborah over at Hills of Books on Instagram for the Magician's Guild book, which is the first book in the Dark Magicians trilogy. What happened to my voice? And I took part in that from October 19th to October 29th. I only read 2 books from my TBR and I managed to do all the videos and that I wanted to do, both BookTube and regular YouTube. In terms of a quick stats rundown, I read 1 book from the library, 1 NetGalley book. Oh, why did I write 1 purchased e-copy? I didn't. That's bizarre. Why did I write that? That's a lie. I don't know why that's there. 2 backlist books and 3 new releases. So just a quick summary of, because everything's new this time, how I just how I lay out things. I just want to give you a bit of my own terminology. So when I say backlist books, I mean books that I've owned personally for years in my collection. When I say new release, I mean new NetGalley books and books purchased that came out this year. And when I say recently hauled, that's any book either published years ago or recently that I've just generally recently acquired into my personal collection. So that's what I mean by those little stats. So cracking on in, I think the other stuff I'll probably just save for the video where I do a flick through so you can kind of see what I'm vibing. So the books that I read during October, let's get cracking into that. So the first thing I read was the book that I borrowed from the library, and that is James Baldwin's Giovannis Room. This is a 5-star read for me, published in 1956. This edition is the Penguin's Modern Classics Collection edition. So David, a young American in 1950s Paris, is waiting for his fiancée to return from vacation in Spain. But when he meets Giovanni, a handsome Italian barman, the 2 men are drawn into a tense affair. After 3 months, David's fiancée returns, and denying his true nature, David rejects Giovanni for a safe future as a married man. His decision eventually brings tragedy. Full of passion, regret and longing, this story of a fated love triangle has become a landmark in gay writing, but its appeal is broader. James Baldwin caused outrage as a black author writing about white homosexuals, yet for him the issues of race, sexuality and personal freedom were eternally entwined. So when I read that little bit on the back, I thought that was very interesting, how he was, like, the author was seen as quite controversial in that sense. But in terms of the actual story, as you can tell from my review, my rating, I really did enjoy it. I thought the storytelling of specifically when David meets Giovanni and that entanglement of passion and how that developed and then sort of fractured and broke was very lyrical but also quite intense. I was so engaged, so engrossed in their story together that I was like frantically turning the pages. My eyes couldn't keep up with how fervently I was turning things. I feel like it perfectly encaptures and creates that anxious fever of emotion, leaving me utterly conflicted, because these characters, obviously the relationship between Giovanni and David is cheating. Like, it's obviously not a nice thing to do because he has a fiance and his fiance has gone away because she's sort of deciding whether, it's a bit of a dick move really, she's deciding whether she does want to be with David or not, so she's off gallivanting, thinking about life and that, and I'm obviously wondering what is she doing gallivanting, do you know what I mean? So she has kind of left him in an awkward situation. Like, you can't just leave someone and be like, I'll let you know in 3 months how I feel. Like, no, they can move on. But technically he is still tied to her, he has engaged, they are technically still together. So obviously what they're doing together is wrong because David is cheating on his fiance. But at the same time, the passion that is so described, just it makes me conflicted because it's such a, at times, beautiful but dangerous relationship, because when you read deeper about it, it is pretty toxic, you know, especially in the sense that Giovanni is openly gay and David isn't really, but he hangs around with the crowd and he kind of denies himself. It almost comes across as if he's better than them, which isn't a nice feeling. I feel like at times he does use Giovanni, and he definitely is, because he's getting what he wants from him but without the publicity of being in a relationship, if you know what I mean. I did though feel so much for them two as characters. They actually pained me and it's crazy because it's such a short story, but it was a roller coaster of a ride, honestly, and the writing style in general was just so Moorish. So I think I'll definitely be picking up some more works from Baldwin because I definitely enjoyed this one. Then I've got a audiobook that I listened to, and that is The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, by Robert Louis Stevenson. This one was narrated by Sam Dale. I gave it 3 stars, and it was originally published in 1886, but the audiobook was published in August 2019. It's classic horror mystery kind of genre, published by Penguin, but the audio I listened was a free to listen to thing on BBC Sounds, in case you guys are interested and you want to check it out. So this story is one that I've kind of been wanting to read for a while or listen to, and it's basically the duality of humanity, of man, as Dr. Jekyll sort of experiments with the human psyche and personality, and it kind of backfires on him, creating this split off persona of Mr. Hyde, and it's kind of a mystery surrounding who is this Mr. Hyde, where's Dr. Jekyll, because people haven't seen him for a while, and murders begin to arise. So I definitely enjoyed the narration of this one. It was calm and relaxing, but it definitely built up on the intensity when it was needed for the story's direction, whatever was happening, action based. I enjoyed the eerie kind of atmospheric tension that we got throughout the story, and overall I would say the story was generally enjoyable. However, in terms of horror factor, I did find it underwhelming. I don't know if this probably would have scared the people of the time that it was originally published, because, you know, it was one of those stories that, you know, they were just coming into horror, and I think they would have been frightened of different things. I feel like that confusion in terms of mental health might have been something that easily scared people, but now us in a more scientific era know more about it. That sort of thing's more tropey, like, okay, it's a mental health condition, that's not frightening in that regard, you know what I mean? It's not like horrific in that regard, but I felt like it had I felt like if it had been a full novel, it could have explored the good versus evil narrative further, perhaps benefiting by more of a Dr. Jekyll point of view rather than just reading from the perspective of, I think it was his lawyer and a couple of other characters around that. I think generally, and I've seen a few people have mentioned this, particularly on Goodreads reviews, that the concept works better with a level of ignorance, and by that I mean like the surprise twist of the fact that, you know, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, everyone knows they're the same person. It's kind of about mental health and, you know, what people in a scientific field, how far they can go to explore that sort of thing. So it's not really as twisty and like horrifying nowadays, but I think it would have packed more of a punch when it was published. I hope that made sense. I do have my Goodreads review. My Goodreads are always linked in the description if you are interested in more of a cohesive, less rambly, more structured thoughts. Sometimes my words just get away with me. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Then I read Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which I gave a 5 stars, originally released in 2007 of July. YA fantasy, published by Bloomsbury. I'm trying to get in the habit of reading these sort of stats just to kind of give my reviews more substance in that way, and give you a bit of information if you are interested in particular publications and, you know, dates things came out and stuff, just to kind of see how they age and things like that. But anyway, I've done a whole reading vlog on this. If you are interested, I'll link it in the cards for you, but we are just going to move on now because I've talked a hell of a lot about this already. But it was my first time reading this series. In the last couple of years I'd never read them before, so I was vlogging my experience reading them for the first time, and this was my final installment. So yeah, check out that vlog if you're interested. Then I read another Tor free-to-read short story on their website, and this one was called Of Roses and Kings by Melissa Marr, and I gave it 3 stars. It came out April 27th, 2020, and it's kind of like adult fantasy, fairy tale retellings, LGBT short stories. I will get up the synopsis because I feel like where it's such a short story, I don't want to spoil it, and I think I've read another one and I'll probably do the same for that because again, it's short story. I don't want to give too much away because they're literally like under 50 pages, you know. Right, so this one says, in this dark, skewed take on Alice's adventures in Wonderland, Alice is now the Red Queen, and her maid must tread the fine line between favour and blame in this strange world. So yeah, it's only 33 pages long, again published by Tor. So I thought this was a really interesting take on the world of Wonderland. I know it's one of those stories that have been redone and retold so many times before, but I still feel like this had that quality and substance of that slight unique spin, but still respecting the original concept of Wonderland. So I feel like it done it well. It felt true to the general vibe of the story and the land and the type of characters, which I like, because I do like to see in retellings, although I don't read a lot of them, that familiarity, that paying homage to the original concept, you know, so I did like that. But for me personally, some things just felt a little bit too open-ended to feel really satisfied, and because we're probably not going to be coming back to this story, I mean, I don't know if the author typically writes this sort of fiction, if she has got a more expansive world, but in my mind I'm thinking, okay, because I'm not really looking out for another development, another installment in this, I just don't feel like my satisfaction would come about, you know what I mean? But I did enjoy it. Following on, as I said, I read another one of Tor's short fiction, and this was The Perfection of Teresa Watkins by Justin C. Key. I gave it 4 stars. Wow, this was just such an interesting concept, right? It released September 23rd, 2020. It's sci-fi short stories, and this one again, I will read the description of. It's, even just thinking about it now, blew my mind away because it's just so weird and interesting. So it says here, Justin C. Key's The Perfection of Teresa Watkins is a skillful speculative exploration of the intersection of race, mental illness and the American prison system. Darius and Teresa Watkins confronted death once as fellow cancer survivors. Their lives are full and productive, their love is shielded against Darius's bouts of anxiety and Teresa's occasional flare-ups. Yet when tragedy strikes, Darius will try everything to save his wife, even against his fears that she may have transformed into an entirely different person, literally. So this one was a very unique story. It discussed really interesting topics such as life after death, science, race, American prison system, and it was heavier and more complex of a story than I expected for, again, such a short piece. I feel like it done well in using what little time it had to really delve deep without feeling overwhelming. I guess it can be very triggering, for example, you know, the conversations on cancer, mental health, panic attacks, bodily violence such as self-harm, but it was done in such an interesting way. So I thought I would be triggered going in. So I went in kind of hardening myself, and funnily enough, I wasn't triggered by the things that I thought I would be triggered by. I was actually triggered by, how many times could I say triggered? I was actually triggered by the panic attacks. So I will warn you on that in particular. The descriptions on it wasn't even that intense, but because the characters counting their breath as they're in the middle of a panic attack to calm themselves down, you find your heart racing with him. And I think it affected me more because that week that I read it, I had literally just had a panic attack in the middle of the night. So I think because it was so fresh in my system, it affected me more. So definitely bear in mind that, and again, of course, other content warnings for all the other things I've listed. But I really did like this. I think I'll definitely look more into the authors' other stories that they've done, and keep an eye out for more short works that they perhaps put up on tour as well. So yeah, I really did like that and I would recommend it. Okay, and then we've got the buddy read that I read, which was The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan. I gave this one 3 stars. It was originally released in 2001. It's high fantasy and it's published by Orbit. So this one is, as you can imagine, about a magician's guild. This is the first in the trilogy, the Black Magician trilogy, and then I believe there's a second sort of companion trilogy to it, the Something Thief or something like that. But this one was really, really interesting. We've got new world building, we've got a lot of characters, we've got some high fantasy and some politics. Each year the magicians in Imarden gather to purge the city streets of vagrants, urchins and miscreants. Masters of the disciplines of magic, they know that no one can oppose them, but the protective shield is not as impenetrable as they believe. For as the mob are herded from the city, a young street girl, furious at the authorities' treatment of her family and friends, hurls a stone at the shield, putting all her rage behind it. To the amazement of all who bear witness, the stone passes unhindered through the barrier and renders the magician unconscious. It is an inconceivable act, and the guild's worst fear has been realised. An untrained magician is loose on the streets. She must be found, and quickly, before her uncontrolled powers unleash forces that will destroy both her and the city that is her own. I meant to say home. So, we are following a few different perspectives in this. I want to say about 4 or 5, but our main character is definitely Sonia or Sonia. I've been pronouncing it as Sonia in my head. And she is this young girl. She is kind of like a street kid. She's just moved back to the slum dwells that she had originally with her aunt and uncle moved out of. But in this purge, she has been pushed back down to the bottom of the slums, which is very hard to live in, very hard to make ends meet in, and it's just a difficult way of life. And it was just so interesting to kind of see as the story, particularly around her, developed. I must say my first buddy reading experience definitely enhanced that. I feel like maybe, again, particularly shown more in my written review, it enhanced my critiques a little bit, I like to feel, and just made me think about more things. That we'd stop every couple of chapters and just discuss what had happened, what we thought about it. So I did like that, and I'll definitely be taking part in more buddy reads, particularly with Deborah if she's willing, but also with other people. I've actually got a buddy read coming up soon with some girls on Instagram for To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Pliny, so I'm really looking forward to that one, especially because it's a thicker book and I'll need some determination and motivation to get through such a big one. But anyway, I really loved how quickly action developed. There wasn't a lot of waiting around. We kind of set the scene rather quickly but efficiently, and then boom, things was happening, emotions were moving, and it was just what I needed. I needed it to be kind of compelling to read and really get into. So in that way it kind of reads a little bit more YA, but it is high fantasy, so I feel like you need to be kind of comfortable with reading a lot of high fantasy and politics and settled in that genre to truly like appreciate it. Again, I also enjoyed watching how Sonia developed, particularly concerning the magic, and especially when she was in encounters with Lord Wrotham. There was a lot of characters in here that I really did like, especially interactions between different characters and how they kind of sparked plot developments, plot twists, that sort of thing, moving the story along, of course. In terms of things that maybe could have been better, it was very convenient. A lot of things I was predicting were happening, and it's funny because it's things that I really obviously wanted to happen, but it wasn't satisfying because they were happening so easily almost. I don't know if this is truly Canavan's first book, so maybe that's why, I think it might be, maybe that's why things were a little bit more easy to connect and understand, you know, so maybe she's just developed as time's gone on. Our villain, for the most part, really felt more like an annoying kind of petty irritant rather than a villain. However, there is promise in the next book of a more darker storyline and a darker villain, so with more complex ties because of who they are. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that develops, and maybe it'll be an interesting contrast to see the villain in this versus the villain in that, and I wonder if they're going to band together, so I'm interested. And I must say, it hasn't really aged extremely well in the last decade. Like, it's not an extremely old book, but it was obviously like 9 years ago or whatever, so things have changed, and I feel like it's not as PC as it probably could have been today. So there was a lot of descriptions that I cringed at and was like, oh, I don't like the sound of that, but I mean, I guess it hasn't aged well. It's kind of its time, which again, it was only 2001, so it's crazy to think how different acceptable things are from then to now, if you know what I mean. But overall, I did really like this. I will definitely be continuing the series, and then most likely the follow-up series. I just don't know when I will get to them. And then lastly, I read, well, it felt like forever I was reading this book, but it was a NetGalley arc that I read, and it's Winter, White and Wicked by Shannon Dittemore or Dietmore. And I gave this a 2 stars. This released on the 13th of October 2020. It's YA urban fantasy, and it's published by Amulet Books, which I think is an imprint of Abrams Kids. Again, I'll get the synopsis for that one, because where I didn't really enjoy it, I can't really give you a compelling or interesting kind of synopsis. I feel like it would be tainted with my thoughts. Mad Max Fury Road meets Frozen in this striking YA fantasy about a rigged driver's journey to save her friend. I mean, it kind of interested me because I wanted to see where that would go, but I've never seen Mad Max, but I like Frozen, and I don't know, I don't think it worked for me. Twice orphaned Sylvie has chipped out a niche for herself on Lace, an island cursed by eternal winter. Alone in her truck, she takes comfort in 2 things: the solitude of the roads and the favour of winter, an icy spirit who has protected her since she was a child. Sylvie likes the road when no one asks who her parents were or what she thinks of the rebels in the north. But when her best friend Lenore runs off with the rebels, Sylvie must make a haul too late in the season for a smuggler she wouldn't normally work with, the infamous Mars Dresden. Alongside his team, Hyla, a giant warrior woman, and Kin, a boy with skin like stone, Sylvie will do whatever it takes to save her friend. But when the time comes, she'll have to choose safety, anonymity, and the favour of winter, or the future of the island that calls home. So it sounds really compelling, really interesting, but it just fell really short for me, unfortunately. Clearly representing the Nightmare Before Christmas merch, aren't I? It was weird because initially I thought I'd enjoy it, and then I sort of went, there was like this flashback near the very beginning, and I was like, maybe not. And then I thought, actually I'm kind of liking this, and then it just slipped into a downslide from there. I just found that the rig trucking adventure really wasn't for me. I wasn't interested in this constant moving in this truck, trying to, like, there was a lot of descriptions of the truck not called the Dragon not being able to make certain things or just pushing through, and it was just a lot of driving commentary and of things I didn't really care for, to be honest. It took forever for me to read. It was my lunchtime reading break thing, but it just took far too longer. I found that when I was reading it, my concentration levels were breaking far too easily and I'd find myself zoning out, and yeah, for that reason it just felt like it took centuries to get through. I felt like it lacked necessary world building in the very beginning, but then it transitioned into trying to do and trying to be too many things at once that it got confusing, and at that point I just don't really care anymore, unfortunately. So I will not be reading anything like this again, I don't think. I'm not really too keen to check out more of the author's work, unfortunately. It's just not one that's for me. So just a quick genre tally before I move on to my favourite book of the month. So I ended up reading 2 classics, 2 YA fantasies, 2 high adult fantasies, 1 sci-fi, 1 horror, although the Tor short collections can be seen as horror because they have some graphic content in there that's kind of scary a little bit. And overall I read 7 books, which I was really happy with because it was taking me ages to obviously get through these ones. This one was a buddy read, so we were staggering how much to read over 11 days, and this one just took me ages because I was vlogging the experience and I was doing other things because I had my time off, and I just thought, oh, let me just chuck in some ebooks or some stuff that I can find free online like the Tor books, and it just added up, which I'm really happy about. My favourite book of the month by far I would say it was Harry Potter. I think just because it was awesome just finishing the series and kind of coming to a head and finally knowing how it ends. I don't know how I haven't managed to get major spoilers throughout the whole thing, but obviously generally knew what was happening, but to actually read it and then watch the movie experience was another level. So yeah, that was my favourite read of the month, and for now I will leave you to it. I feel like I've been speaking forever and I've actually got another video that I kind of want to film after this, so let me know what you've been reading, let me know what your favourite book of the month might have been, what you're planning to read. Oh, and before I do go, there is a readathon challenge that I think I might be taking part on. My friend Kat's Reading Corner on Instagram just put up a thing on her stories that she was participating in. It sounded interesting because I hadn't heard of it before, but it is the Clear Your Shit readathon hosted by Clear Your Shit on Twitter, and it seems like the people involved in this is at mouse.reads and at ink and plasma. I'll try and put all the information in the description if you're interested. It starts today, which is the 1st of November, and I think it ends the 27th of December perhaps. And here's all the, I'm going to see if I can find the information as I read it, but it just says, welcome to your journey to save the kingdom. There's books falling on citizens and no one knows why, but we may all be buried in books soon. It's up to you to make it stop. You basically have no skills, but some wizard picked you for this. Weird choice, but okay. I'm your narrator, by the way. Let me give you more backstory here. I know you just woke up. Get some coffee or tea or whatever. Just wake up. Stop yawning. It's the kingdom of Shelfler. You live here as a peasant. Books are falling on everyone, and we're pretty sure it's this witch on the mountain's fault. I don't know, the wizard told you that. I don't trust men with long beards, but apparently you do. So that's kind of like the concept behind it, which sounds really fun. And then it's got like all these different quests. So I'm probably now just going to fill in the books that I would like to finish. I won't really do a TBR for it if I do take part, just because it will probably just be a lot of the books that I've mentioned in my TBRs, my seasonal TBRs, and some other things. So it's got examples like fantasy, magical book, shortest book, those sort of things. So I'll let you know in November if I did take part in that, or if I have been taking part of that, because it doesn't finish until December. But yeah, that's it for this video. Again, I'll speak to you in another video soon.